So our show today is we've got some of the regulars joining us, starting with Dan Lohrmann from Presidio. And I always ask the guests in advance what they want to talk about. And Dan wants to talk about the plethora of crypto scams out there. Take it away, Dan. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, Mike, thanks for having me back. It's great to be back on your show as always, and thanks for all what you do and for what Matt does with My Tech News. You can't help but see the headlines every day. Bitcoin just reached last week, and a day to day when you're watching this might be up or down, but it's basically at all-time highs. It went over 120,000 for Bitcoin. Ether's surging back above 3,000 for Ether. And we could go right through the list. I'm not going to start naming all the different cryptocurrencies out there, but there's a lot of legislation, which is and I'm not pro or anti crypto. So this is not an endorsement of any one cryptocurrency or against it, or I'm certainly not going to try to sell anything to anybody. But there is a lot of legislation that's going through Congress. The president and his administration have supported that, talked about creating stable coins, maybe even the U.S. government investing in stable coins. So just a lot of things. That's really not what I want to talk about today. But with that, I did a blog back about, well, actually, no, it was just last week. Came out on July 13th called Bitcoin Booms, Scammers Bloom. And so the headline really is around all the surges in, the same time as all of these different cryptocurrencies are taking off, which is a great thing for a lot of people. I'm not knocking that. But I obviously the scams are not. And so when anything is hot, we saw that honestly, a little side note here, with what happened, the tragedy in Texas, the floods, and then all the scammers come out. Whenever any issue is hot and it's new and it's different, people want new information. Hey, what happened? And then all of a sudden, people give. And, of course, we're all, supportive of giving to, the United Way or whatever organization that's going to legitimately support them, the Red Cross, those kinds of things. But then these scamming organizations pop up, like Fathers for Texas, or whatever it might be. I mean, and then who knows where the money's really going? And they say it's going towards river victims, or same things happening with Bitcoin right now. And so some of these headlines, it's just literally hundreds and hundreds this year of scams. I'm just going to read a couple of the headlines here. In one, two men charged in a $650 million global scam that promised 300% returns. And this was an indictment unsealed in District of Puerto Rico, accused a couple of people. I'm not going to name the names of the people on the show here, but in Georgia and Florida, New Jersey, basically operating a promoting Omega Pro, an international crypto multi-level marketing scheme that promised investors a 300% return over 16 months through their foreign exchange trading. So that's just one example. We can go through all this list, but whenever anybody, things to watch out for right out of the gate, and let you jump in here, but is, clearly watch out for promises. I'll guarantee 200% return, 50% return in 6 weeks. Anything like that, they can't promise those things.
Yeah, my general philosophy, because over 45 years of journalism, I've probably heard most of the scams, is if it's too good to believe, don't believe it. I mean, no one can guarantee it. Heck, we don't even know what's going to happen tomorrow, let alone, 6 weeks down the line. So yeah, it's pretty bad. And I think most people are, oh, maybe not. The internet has a mishmash of folks. Some are savvy, some are not. And then I think the savvy folks that really understand this stuff would ignore that. However, there's probably a lot of, just sort of average folks with average educations who have never dealt with this before. Maybe that sounds attractive to them and they fall for it. I don't know. So,
Well, and to the extent that you see, record boom, and you have true stories that people say, hey, you and I were chatting before the show went live here, of I got in at 20,000, I got in at whatever the number was, and or 1 year ago it's doubled in 1 year. There are a lot of probably thousands, maybe millions of people out there, thousands for sure, who got in at 20,000 or lower, and now it's at 120,000. So yeah, I mean, from that perspective, they made a lot of money. That doesn't mean that right now, if you're jumping in, I mean, the advice would be, of course, do your homework. I can read a couple more of these headlines. ABC Chicago, celebrity crypto cons, Chicago area man loses 10K in crypto scam by an Elon Musk impersonator. So again, we've talked in this show and others about, deep fake impersonations. You can take someone's image, you can take their voice, you can say, hey, I'm investing my money in this. Just because you see it online, or maybe you see it's some kind of an ad. And this person thought it was legitimate because it was Elon Musk saying he was investing in it, and the person lost $10,000. Another woman lost 500K in Bitcoin. Someone else, there's a whole laundry list. You can go to the website. I won't read through all of these, but the good news is they are catching some of these people. In one case, two Londoners got 12 years for a $2 million scam. So I know that our law enforcement community is working this, but this is very, 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 very hot right now. I'll just read one more. YouTube video of Trump promoting Bitcoin at the NATO summit is a crypto scam. So I mean, it's like people believe that stuff. They believe it. They invest, and I just say make sure you talk to a financial advisor if you're going to do it. Make sure you really do your homework, because as we're going to talk about it next, a lot of the things that we see online are not what they seem to be.
Yeah, that gets to AI. We were talking about that too. AI it's made become very sophisticated in a very short period. Generative AI, that is. AI has been around for a long time, but the generative form of it, starting with the most popular one that people may know, Chat GTP, you can do just about anything with that. And like you say, I've seen these ads where other, national media personalities are supposedly endorsing some product. And I thought, why in the heck would they do something like that? So it's clearly a fake. I also wanted to talk about fake jobs and other LinkedIn scams on social media. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, and then, I mean, I did another blog week before that, so back on July 6th. But this trend has really been taking off over the last year, and that is going dating back to obviously a lot of the trends that we saw with the pandemic, the coronavirus, working from home, especially. A lot of organizations are still 100% remote. And so, what they're really the bad actors from North Korea and other rogue states and other parts of the world, criminal organizations applying for jobs, and then basically being hired. And you think, okay, maybe some of you are thinking, I heard about that. It happened with WWT came out with an announcement that they hired somebody from North Korea. That was a one-off. Come on, this is not happening very often, right? Think again. It's in the hundreds, and many people now, we don't know the exact numbers, but we're hearing it could be in the thousands of people nationwide. Their companies are hiring these people, especially if they're 100% remote. And maybe they're, this goes through a whole series of different levels of sophistication. People pretending to be someone else. Ultimately they may even, like anything else, hiring. I remember back more than a decade ago, we had a big thing in the state of Michigan, hiring people that if they were too good to be true for too good of a price, it probably was a reason why they wanted the job, and maybe they were an insider threat. So we are hiring people that that person that something's wrong here. Something doesn't make sense. But I mean, there's literally hundreds of examples. Richard, jump in here, but of fake fake employees. They're real people, but they're pretending to be someone else, different persona. Working from North Korea, working from other places, getting jobs. I mean, this is something every company, if you're hiring people that are 100% remote, you need to be making this a top priority. And there are ways you can verify them There are services that'll help and make sure this is a real person really working in Peoria, Illinois, not working in North Korea, and that I'm hiring this individual because if they're in your company and they're they get access, I'm sure they're doing a lot of nefarious things. So I'll let Richard jump into the conversation
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. And on top of that, what if, your outsourced contractor for developing your code has hired those people? So you don't even know that some of their people are North Koreans and you're interacting with them same way. They've just gone one step further away. Big, big problem.
Yeah,
There's a,
I think I'm sorry. Go ahead.
oh yeah, just a couple other thoughts. I just saw today that it turns out that for Microsoft to get the US Gov Cloud business, they had to agree to provide support, and they're using people in China. They've been doing it for 8 years or something,
Well,
and part of the requirement is, well, you can do that, but somebody's got to oversee their work or something. And it turns out, according to Politico, that no, nobody's looking at their work at all. It's it's just
yeah,
scary.
it's people trying to save money or whatever, not thinking it through.
Yeah.
So, Richard, you also wanted to talk about some of the old hacks and new hacks. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So the of course, all summer long we've been hearing about attacks on Marks and Spencer, and Harrods. So those are the stalwarts of retail in the UK. So it gets a lot of attention. Marks and Spencer is claiming something ridiculous, $200 or $300 million in losses due to an attack from a ransomware gang, which turns out it's not so much as a gang as an affiliation. People just using tools and get labeled because they all use the same tools, get labeled as being part of the same organization. And the UK police just arrested a team of 4 people, all local to the UK, the oldest person being 20, the rest being between 17 and 19 years old. And those are the kids responsible for this amazing hack, that ransomware attack that caused all this damage. So you kind of wonder about the state of security in the UK retailers. Is this, what we went through with Lowe's and TJX and finally Target, more than a decade ago? So maybe US retailers are a little bit better shape than UK retailers, but they, it's just more of the same. It says ransomware writ large all over again.
All right.
Uh,
What else you want to talk about, Richard?
it's back to it's kind of like the fake job applicants, but this only popped up in the last week, where all of a sudden it's discovered that a single engineer named Soham Parak has had like multiple simultaneous jobs working for YC funded companies. And I've seen the email he uses to reach out to them. And he just says, "Hi, I'm a full stack developer. I'm dedicated and I work hard, all this stuff." And he lists all the things he can do. And then he lists all the companies he's worked at, including the ones he's currently working at. And
Hmm.
it's like you see that, and if you ask for 200,000 a year, you'd say, "Done. You're hired. 100% remote. That's cheaper than what engineers cost in California." So, anyways, he would have 6 or 7 of those jobs at once, just making a killing. And as this came out, and everybody now has fired him from that role, he's apologized if he hurt anybody. But actually, he was doing the work. He was outsourcing it, but he was getting the job done. So this had to come out, through, I don't know, suspicious people, not because he wasn't doing a good job. And through all this, I learned that there's a group on Reddit, a discussion group for overemployed. So it's Reddit/r/overemployed. And you dive in there, and it's all people doing this. Now, most of them are, more on the scam side, right? They don't actually want to do any work. So it's all the tricks of the trade, so you don't have overlapping weekly meetings. You got to attend both of them. Um, the little catchphrases, like, and I've started to hear this, and people, and it gets me worried. One of the things that they all pass around says, "Oh, use this next time you're in a Zoom meeting," and they finally call on you. unmute yourself and you say, nothing to add from here. And that's all it takes. It's that catchphrase.
Nothing to add from here. That's
Yeah.
funny.
So I'm definitely going to use that when I'm called, when I'm not.
I've heard that it's interesting. I've heard a number of people who I don't know that particular story, although I was going to share something similar that I want to bring up, Mike, related to the whole hacker community and who are they out there and what ages are. And Neil Yandurley posted this yesterday from a interesting study. But one thing I've heard related to that, Richard, is people who have multiple jobs and then they outsource their jobs. So like,
Right.
so
Yeah.
there may be, same kind of a thing. So maybe they have three jobs at once, but two of the jobs or parts of their jobs, they hire somebody from India or somewhere offshore or whatever that does 80% of their job. So they do maybe 25% of four jobs, and then 75% of their job is being, so if they have to be face to face in meetings, if they have to be in an all staff, they do that in person. but the behind the scenes work they outsource.
Sure.
So people who have multiple jobs with multiple companies, which is pretty scary. Again, it gets back to the vetting. I will share this one thing. This is a study. I'll send you more details on this, Mike, so you can share this. But a pretty comprehensive study that was done by Anatomy. It's called Anatomy of a Hacker. It says most hackers were Gen Z, age 18 to 24, 57%, or millennials, 25 to 34, were 28%. Nevertheless, the stereotypes of teenage hackers proved to be more accurate than its counterpoint in Gen X freakers, with 5% being under 18, only 2% over 45. Additionally, the trope of hackers being disproportionately male proves to be true. Based on this research, 96% of respondents identified as male. Only 4% said they were female. So that's pretty interesting. Again, this is one study, but a lot more data behind this, but kind of interesting numbers.
Rings true. I mean, the internet came about when I was about 30 years old, I think. And so I've got, two kids and a job and a salary. And if I'm not going to hack, my internal moral compass is going to say, don't do that. At the very least, you could end up in jail and your career ruined. Whereas if you're 17, yeah, so a lot of the founders of the security vendors I talk to nowadays did start out as hackers. And, because they're minors, they could kind of get away with it and got slapped on the hand and their records expunged. And they went on to, be leaders of the industry.
It sounds a little bit like a novella that I heard about back in 2011, but we won't go into that, will we, Richard?
No. Got a copy on the shelf here, one of the few hard copies.
Yeah, one of the younger generation. They're much more savvy than when I was at 17. I'll tell you that.
Oh, yeah, we could talk about that. We could complain about that all day. So we recently hired a intern, and to get her master's, and she didn't, last very long. But every email we got from her was written by ChatGPT.
Oh, wow.
And you could just tell. It was like you'd ask her to do something, and in the response, she'd repeat it, as if to demonstrate she understood the instructions. And I'm fine with that. If it helps communicate, that's great. But it was interesting to see that playing out. You hear everybody complaining.
Well, I thought the other piece, what got me mentioning the study with what you just said about multiple jobs there, Richard, was that the beginning of the second paragraph. There's one last little piece of this. Most hackers, 82% in the study, did not hack full time. They treated it as a part-time side gig, side hustle job, or something that they are in the process of making a full-time occupation, but weren't making enough money doing it yet to make it full time. So interestingly enough, that person sitting in the next cube as you're listening to this, I hope they're doing the work for the boss that you think they're doing the boss for.